Live here. We're just about to get underway, and in a moment we will be able to cross live to Salford and join Julie Etchingham at ITV. It's taking place, it's going to last an hour. We'll be having your comments and critique of the debate and what the performance of the two candidates right as soon as it is finished in about an hour's time. Well, let's cross live to Julie Etchingham in Salford.
From across the UK, and you at home too can take part using the hashtag ITV debate. And before we take the first question, each candidate will briefly set out why they think they will be the best Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Julie, and to everyone here and at home. This country faces a momentous choice. We can either continue with the same old failed can-kicking approach, destroying trust in politics, sapping business confidence, or else we can change, get back our mojo, restore this country's reputation around the world, and put ourselves on the path to long-term success. And the way to do that is to get Brexit done by October the 31st, unite our country with more money for our schools, more police on the beat, full fibre broadband for all, and make our case to the people again, with renewed power and conviction that to have fantastic infrastructure and public services, you must have a dynamic market economy, because that is how we beat the semi-Marxist wealth and job-destroying lunacy of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. Now, someone who's campaigned for Brexit and who believes in it and who has a plan to unite this country and who has long experience of beating the Labour left, I believe I'm the right person to unleash on this project, and I hope I can count on your support.
Jeremy Hunt, your opening statement.
Good evening, Julie. Good evening, everyone at home. As a tough negotiator, I'll deliver Brexit, but so much more. I'll be the first Prime Minister to have been an entrepreneur, and I'll use that experience to fire up our economy. The first Prime Minister to have run the NHS, and, like I did there, will reform and fund our vital public services. I'm the Foreign Secretary who will invest in our brilliant armed services so that we walk tall in the world, and the first Prime Minister for half a century to have won a marginal seat. So I know how to get young people to support our party. In poll after poll, I'm the public's preferred choice for Prime Minister, because I appeal not just to those who already vote Conservative, but those we need to win. And to those watching at home, I'll be your Prime Minister, whoever you vote for, as I bring together our amazing United Kingdom.
Thank you, gentlemen both. Well, we invited viewers from right across the country to submit questions to us. We've independently selected the questioners, and they are with us in the studio tonight. They support various parties or are undecided. The candidates don't know what they'll be asked, and also hear the people who'll listen to tonight's debate. They've said they've voted Conservative in the past or may do so in the future. So let's go to our first question from Tony Scrace. Tony.
I voted Conservative much of my life, but now I support the Brexit Party, and I'd like to see Nigel Farage in number 10. Can you promise me that we will definitely leave the EU on October the 31st?
Tony, thank you. Each now gets a chance to answer separately, and then we'll go to a debate. Jeremy Hunt.
Tony, I am as keen as Boris and as keen as you to leave by October the 31st. But, you know, we've had a breach of trust in politics by not leaving at the end of March, as we promised you we would do. And no politician, not me, not Boris, no one should make a promise unless they absolutely know they can deliver it. And Parliament took no deal off the table at the end of March. It's trying to do that again. So the way we get out by the end of October is send to Brussels someone who can negotiate a deal with the European Union. That means someone that they will talk to, someone that they will engage with, and then we can get a deal that gets through Parliament. I'm the person who will do that.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. I think it's absolutely vital that we come out on October the 31st. Otherwise, Tony, we will continue to hemorrhage trust, not just in the Conservative Party or indeed the Labour Party, but in politics generally. And that's why I have a 4-point plan to deal with our European Union citizens, the 3.2 million. They should have their rights protected. We should make sure that we look after the 39 billion. I think that should be suspended in a state of creative ambiguity above the talks until we get the result that we need. Solve the problems of the Irish border where they properly belong in the context of the free trade agreement that we will do after we come out on October the 31st. And to make our friends and partners across the Channel concentrate and to understand our seriousness, we must simultaneously prepare to come out without a deal. And I think everybody understands the business sense of doing that.
Okay.
We can do that, we will be ready, and we'll come out on October the 31st.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Mr Hunt, Mr Johnson said in his opening statement, warning against can kicking. People may be worried that not with a definite guarantee on the 31st, that may be what you're doing. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think I'm far more likely to get us out by the 31st of October because I have a plan which involves engaging with the European Union, negotiating with them. But I just want to test, because Boris has mentioned this date a lot, so I just want to know how solid that commitment is. If you don't get us out of the EU by the 31st of October, will you resign?
We're going to come out on October the 31st. And I think anybody who goes into this negotiation proposing yet again to kick the can down the road will, I think, run the risk of forfeiting trust with the electorate and also undermining our negotiating position in Brussels.
Could you answer Mr Hunt's question?
Delay does not deliver a deal.
Julia,
a deadline will deliver a deal. And we must stick to that deadline.
I think it's a no. And what we've got is someone who says it's do or die for the country.
I'm sorry. I think what we have with
I asked you if you'd
opponent,
resign, Boris.
What I have with my opponent is somebody
Will you resign if you don't deliver it, yes or no?
My opponent is clearly not committed to coming out of the EU on October the 31st.
I just wanted to ask if you'd resign if you don't deliver it.
Right, gentlemen, it won't. Excuse me, gentlemen. Sorry, can I just say it will not help if you speak over one another.
No, I understand.
So please, could you respond to the question that Mr Hunt has put to you, Mr Johnson, and then you can respond, Mr Hunt.
I think it's very, very important not to envisage any circumstances in which we would fail to come out of the EU on October the 31st. I don't want to hold out to the EU the prospect that they might encourage my resignation by refusing to agree a deal. And I think it's extraordinary that we should now be seriously telling the British electorate that we could propose to kick the can down the road beyond October the 31st. We did it in March the 29th. I'd like to know how much further, how many more days exactly would my opponent be willing to delay?
Mr Hunt, respond to that.
Julie, this matters to me because my birthday is actually on the 1st of November and nothing would be a better birthday present. A birthday present than knowing we've left on the 31st of October. Now, I asked Boris a straight question, and he said very clearly before that it was leaving on October the 31st, do or die.
It is.
And I think it's do or die for the country, but not a Prime Minister who will put his own neck on the line.
Mr. Hunt,
and that is not leadership.
Could you respond to Mr Johnson's question about when then, if it's not the 31st, how much longer? Is it days, is it weeks, is it by Christmas?
Well, the reality is that if you have a Prime Minister...
How about Christmas?
If you have a Prime Minister...
Christmas any good?
If you have a Prime Minister who has gratuitously insulted the other side, and not that Boris would ever have done that, then there won't be engagement. And my worry, frankly, is that you're setting a fake deadline because we'll end up with an election before we have Brexit. And the great irony about this whole debate is that if you think about the most Brexit-supporting Conservatives like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker and Mark Francois, they're actually more likely to get Brexit with me than with Boris. Because I have a plan to deliver it. I will get the engagement with the European Union.
Let Mr Johnson respond.
Can I make a serious point about why I think this strategy is so fatal? We saw in March the 29th that we were only going to delay, if you remember, to April the 8th. That became a further 6-month delay. Our preparations for a no-deal Brexit sagged again. Business was left in a state of deep confusion about what was happening. If we go into these negotiations from the beginning, with a plan to allow that deadline yet again to be fungible, to be a papier-mâché deadline, I'm afraid that the EU will not take us seriously. And nor will business understand that they must prepare for no deal.
Can we get
Boris,
some detail?
Delays,
it's not do or die, is it?
Make it
it's Boris in number 10 that matters.
A deal.
Thank you. Could I just ask some specifics, please? Because both of you say that you want to renegotiate. The EU has repeatedly said they will not renegotiate. They will not reopen the withdrawal agreement, nor will they open that specifically to look at the Northern Ireland backstop. Can you give me precisely what your proposal is for the Northern Ireland border, Mr Hunt?
Yes. First of all, it has to be different to the backstop because that will not get through Parliament. And my plan for the Northern Ireland border has 3 elements based on a 202-page excellent piece of work by a group of MPs led by my friend Greg Hands. So what does it involve? It involves, first of all, mobile checks for food products. Secondly, a trusted trader scheme. And thirdly, use of technology. Not new technology, but technology that already exists.
Okay, very briefly, how quickly is that there and available?
Well, the technology exists. It will obviously take some time to set it up.
Well, if it were there, why wasn't it already agreed?
Well, because obviously the EU didn't want to agree it because they would have rather we stayed in the customs union.
It could be done by October the 31st.
What is the detail of what you propose on the Irish
Well,
border?
as everybody knows, there are an abundant range of solutions, of maximum facilitations for checking, for rules of origin, for contraband, for smuggling, much as is in Greg's paper, but away from the border. And everybody understands that that is how to solve the issues of the frictionless trade, not just at the border with Northern Ireland, but all UK-EU borders.
But
and the crucial
the EU has said they looked the world over to find a solution. They were looking for a solution on this. They found none.
Well, actually, that's not what Michel Barnier says. He's been very clear.
Sabine Veilland, the deputy negotiator, said they looked the world over for
They've been very clear that under no circumstances would they have a hard border or physical checks at the border in Northern Ireland. That is because they understand, as Jeremy has rightly just said, and there's no difference between us on this point, that it is possible to find the solutions to frictionless trade across the Northern Ireland border and indeed every other border. The question is, it can be done by October the 31st. If it's not ready by October the 31st, then we do it in the implementation period.
OK, we're going to stay with this subject. It won't surprise. We're going to go to question 2 now on another matter of Brexit, and we're going to Amar Seth, who has another question for us.
I run my own waste management company. A no-deal Brexit is a frightening prospect for my industry. Jobs will be lost and my business simply won't survive if tariffs are imposed. What can you say to reassure me?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Seth. Boris Johnson.
Well, thank you, Anwar. And I understand very much the issue that you raise. I don't think that we're going to end up by any means with a no-deal exit. That's to say, I don't think there will be the disruptive or disorderly Brexit that you fear and whose risks have been, I think, been escalated in public discourse. What we want to do is, by preparing for no deal, by being very convincing with our European friends and partners about what we intend to do, to get a proper protraction of the existing zero tariff, zero quota arrangements, all the current recognition of our rules, mutual recognition of our rules, until such time as we've done the FTA and solved the problem of the Northern Irish border. That is the way to do it.
Mr Hunt.
Well, Amar, I ran my own business just like you do. And I know what it's like when you have to lose really valuable, trusted employees because there's a sudden change in market conditions and you can't afford to keep someone absolutely brilliant who you want to keep. And if there was no deal, the truth is that the steel business that I visited in Kidderminster a couple of weeks ago would have suddenly 11% tariffs that would wipe out their profits. Farming businesses would suddenly have 40% tariffs on their lamb. It would be very serious. We can get through this, but we can't get through it on a wing and a prayer. We can only get through it if we plan. And I have a 10-point Brexit plan. I've actually got a copy of it here, which has all the details of how we would help businesses like yours get through that no-deal situation.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson, Mr Hunt accepts there is a cost to no deal. Do you?
Well, I certainly think that badly handled, a no-deal, a disruptive no-deal Brexit could be costly. But the crucial thing, and I think everybody is agreed on this in the Conservative Party, the crucial thing is to prepare. So we can get rid of... Now, this is a great country.
How costly?
Well, it's vanishingly inexpensive if you prepare. So, for instance, what we need to do is to make sure that the agricultural sector is properly safeguarded and that we have... just-in-time supply chains properly protected, that we have deals on aviation, and all that. Much of this work has been done. We're virtually that. And I'll just make one additional point. We will have, if we have to go out on no deal, we will have £39 billion to spend, which I think will be very helpful in lubricating the consequences of a no-deal Brexit.
Mr Hunt,
Boris, last time we debated this, you said that in a no-deal situation we'd be able to avoid tariffs through something called, I think you called it Article 24 of GATT. And
yes,
then
Article 24, paragraph 5b.
Good. Well, Geoffrey Cox...
Since I know you're a stickler for detail, Jeremy.
Well, Geoffrey Cox...
And tend to go on about it.
Mr Johnson.
Good. Well, Geoffrey Cox, who is supporting you, says that would not be possible. Indeed...
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does.
No, he doesn't.
Because he says...
What he says...
Boris, let Mr Hunt finish.
All right, sorry.
What he says is that you could only get that agreement to waive tariffs if the other side agreed. And they have made it absolutely clear that they won't agree. And do you agree that getting details like that wrong is fine for a newspaper column, but if you're Prime Minister, that is people's jobs at stake?
No, because I think only a defeatist and somebody who actually was on the other side of the argument for so long and somebody who didn't wish to, in fact, to come out would take that line. Because actually, if you look at what we've proposed, it's very, very sensible. Under the GATT 24 paragraph 5b arrangement...
Only if the EU agree to it.
Only if the EU agree, Boris. You know that.
You know that. Tariffs, and it would be manifestly, and I've never said anything different, it would be manifestly...
You did. Last time you said we wouldn't face tariffs if there was a no-deal situation.
Yes, because I think it would be...
People like Amar, that he doesn't have to worry when they absolutely
for the EU to impose tariffs on...
Boris, we're not going to leave the EU without a deal with optimism. We have to have the details to help people like Amar's businesses.
Thank you. I did say, please, gentlemen, please. I don't want you talking over one another. Mr Hunt.
Thank you. My point is that you said we would leave with no deal, with no tariffs. That was wrong. You also said, Boris, that it would be 1,000,000 to 1 that we would leave with no deal. Well, I have to tell you that is totally unrealistic. And if you say that, what you're actually telling businesses like Amar's is that they don't need to prepare for no deal. And that is very dangerous for the jobs of people like Amar up and down the country. And I think we have to be responsible and tell people they do need to prepare because the chances of no deal are actually much higher than you're talking about.
Mr Hunt, you have said that if you were pushed to it, you would do it with a heavy heart.
Yes.
A question to you first and then to Mr Johnson. Could you look people in the eye as Prime Minister and saying, I am taking you down a route in which I will preside over you losing your job?
I will not say that because I will prepare our businesses. As someone who's run their own business, last week I announced a £20 billion package of support to help businesses like Amar in a no-deal situation, including the biggest ever cuts to corporation tax in our history, down to 12.5%, £6 billion of support for farmers and the fishing community. So if we prepare, we can get through this. But what we mustn't do is pretend this is going to be a walk in the park. It is going to be very, very challenging.
I don't think there's no conceivable dissent about that. Everybody agrees that we need to prepare. But we also need to make sure that we are ready by October the 31st to come out. And we must get ready. We were virtually ready on March the 29th. Everybody was braced to do it. They were then stood down. It was a catastrophe. Everybody's preparations were allowed to sag. We cannot do it again. If we're going to have a deadline of October the 31st, we must stick to it and we must get ready.
Okay.
And the more we prepare and the better we prepare, the less risk of disruption for people like Anwar and everybody else. And the reason I say that the risk is minimal is that when we prepare and we're convincing in our preparations, the EU will understand that we are ready and they will give us the deal that we need.
For the moment, Mr Johnson, Mr Hunt, thank you very much indeed for that. We're staying with Brexit, so we'll just pause for breath and go to Karen Tracy, who'd like more detail on the dangers of a no-deal Brexit too. Karen.
The leader may be changing, but fundamentally nothing else has. Parliament will not sanction a no-deal Brexit. Isn't a general election now inevitable?
Thank you very much indeed, Karen. Mr Hunt.
Well, Karen, you have summed up why I have not wanted to talk about the 31st of October as a do or die deadline, because I think there is that risk of an election. And because Parliament has taken no deal off the table already, if you were to say that you are going to guarantee a date, you have to be prepared to take us into a general election, because you might need to change Parliament if you can't get the majority for that no-deal Brexit. And I believe, I'm the person, by the way, who would win over more non-Conservative voters than either of us, according to the polls we've seen. But I don't want to do an election until we've delivered Brexit, because I don't think you go back for another mandate to the British people until you've done what you said you'd do last time, which is to leave the European Union. And that's what I'll do.
Mr Johnson.
Well, I think that I think that it's totally defeatist not to set a hard deadline and to set October the 31st as the moment we.
But you won't resign if we don't get it.
Because
Mr Hunt.
Because I don't want to, as I say, I don't want to give the EU any incentive not to give us the deal that we want. And Parliament, contrary to what my opponents just said, Parliament has actually just resisted the temptation to vote down no deal. They've done it again, and I think an outbreak of realism is taking place across our politics. People can see that we are fatally losing trust of the electorate. And they can see that we asked people 3 years ago whether they wanted to leave the European Union. They returned an overwhelming verdict that they wanted to come out. Parliament has failed to deliver that for 3 years. If we now fail again, then I'm afraid we will not win back the hundreds of thousands of voters who are currently deserting us for other parties. And that is how to lose the forthcoming election.
OK.
Boris, the difference between you and me, I'm sorry. Being Prime Minister is about telling people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And the difference between you and me is you are peddling optimism, and I'm saying we can make a tremendous.
Needs a bit of optimism,
Boris,
frankly.
why don't you? We can make.
I think we've had a belly full of defeatism.
We need leadership that is going to guide us through a big constitutional crisis and make a great success of Brexit. And that means being honest with people about the challenges. Look, blood, sweat, toil and tears. Who said that? That was someone who told us about the challenges ahead, led us through it.
And sweat, actually, is what he said.
That is what I'm prepared to do. And I say to you, Boris, now, minimising the risks of no-deal Brexit, to farmers who will have their businesses wiped out when they can't export lamb anymore to the EU, to small businesses like Amars that are suddenly going to be faced with very challenging market conditions. That is not being the Prime Minister this country deserves, because these are challenges we can overcome.
I'm sorry, what I'm hearing
They're challenges you overcome
Can
by
I
facing up to them,
What I'm hearing
not by
again
ducking them.
I want to ask the same question to both of you. If Parliament rules out a no-deal Brexit, would you be prepared to prorogue or suspend Parliament to get to the ends that you want to see?
Well, I think when that's happened in the past, when Parliament's been shut down against its will, we've actually had a civil war. And I think it would be a rather curious thing to do if this is about taking back control for Parliament to actually shut it down. So my answer to that is no. How about you, Boris?
Well, I'm not going to take anything off the table any more than I'm going to take no deal off the table. And I think it's absolutely bizarre at this stage in the negotiations for the UK yet again to be weakening its own position. We've heard earlier on that the October the 31st deadline is not really a deadline. It's not clear at all from what Jeremy is saying when he'd be prepared to come out. He's been once again escalating the fears of a no-deal Brexit, when what we should be doing is getting ready and encouraging the people of this country to believe they can do it, because they can do it.
So
and it's absolutely vital that we prepare for no deal, that we come out on October the 31st, and then we Conservatives will be able to talk to the people of this country about the things that really matter to them apart from the EU.
Okay,
and believe me, there's plenty that they want to hear about.
To return to the question from Karen, she said Parliament will not sanction a no-deal Brexit. Isn't a general election now inevitable? If we do end up in that scenario, Mr Johnson, would you do a deal with the Brexit Party?
I don't believe in doing deals with any party. I think that the Conservative Party is a great party. It's a broad church. One of the advantages I have in this campaign is actually I already have the support of more than half of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, dozens of Remainers as well as Leavers. We can deliver Brexit ourselves, get the job done, and then make the case to the country about modern conservatism and all the fantastic things we're going to do.
Mr Hunt, you don't want a general election. You've been very clear about that. What would your alternative be?
Well, I think we need to choose the Prime Minister who has the best chance of negotiating a deal so that we don't have to face this issue. And the truth is that...
You may be forced into facing the issue.
Yes, and I've said that I will make the preparations for no deal so that we are ready to do that. But if we send someone to Brussels who is a negotiator by background, who can engage with other European countries, we have, I think, a chance of a deal, because I talk to European leaders and they want to solve this. They don't want a no-deal Brexit as well. But if we go with the wrong attitude, if we take an ultra-hardline approach, they will take an ultra-hardline approach too. And then businesses like Amar's up and down the country will suffer needlessly. And so that's why I think if we want to make a success of Brexit, it's not about blind optimism. It's about understanding the details that will get us the deal
Mr. Hunt,
that is right
Mr. Hunt,
for
Mr. Johnson
our
was
country.
shaking his head there.
Well, I think actually if we continually try to wrap ourselves around the current withdrawal agreement and we remain in the customs union and in the single market, which is effectively what is entailed by the present withdrawal agreement, which I resigned over it because it obviously doesn't work for this country.
And you voted for it.
We will end up
Boris,
with
you
a
voted
situation.
for it too, didn't you?
We will end up with a...
Did you not vote for it?
because
Just
there was
answer the
chance-
question. I know you haven't
because
liked
there was-
answering
Not over
that we will
please.
end up in a situation in which this country, having left the EU, is effectively run by the EU. I think that's utter madness. We have the chance now to do a much, much better deal. We should be doing a free trade agreement with our European Union friends and partners, massively to the benefit of either side, then developing a new partnership based on mutual security, mutual defence, all the things that we believe in, and actually intensifying our friendships with our European Union friends, but not through Brussels. That is the way forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Johnson. So, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of part one. We've had nearly half an hour of debate about Brexit, lots of proposals and counter-proposals from both of you. So just before we go to the break, we'd just like some real clarity for the audience here and for our viewers at home. No answer required. Question to both of you. Raise your hand if you feel confident telling the British people that we will have left the EU by the 31st of October.
Well, that's the spirit, Jeremy.
There we
Thank
are.
you very much, gentlemen.
Come on, one to do it. I'll make it happen.
You're going to fool me.
Well, that's pretty clear. Please
thought he
don't
said it
go
couldn't be
away.
done.
As you can see, much more debate between the two candidates.
Well, ITV going to a quick break there. We're not going to. I've been joined in the studio by Nadeem Zahawi. He's a Boris Johnson supporter. We are hoping to be joined momentarily by Alistair Burt, who supports Jeremy Hunt. That was a rather feisty half an hour, Nadeem. Rather feistier than I thought it might be.
I think it was. I think Boris's optimism and determination is coming through loud and clear. I think, judging by the applause in the studio and the reaction to Boris, and that final bit just there with the show of hands was a killer moment for the Boris campaign, because people clearly believe that you need a target, you need to set a deadline if people are to take you seriously, that you're leaving. And it's the problem for Jeremy. It really is.
But he's kind of done that also, hasn't he? Because he said if he doesn't feel that a deal is doable by September the 30th, then he will indeed basically stop negotiations and agree to go out on the 31st of October with a no deal. So there's not actually that much between them, is there?
And therein lies Jeremy's problem. Because he's had to keep moving his position, because he didn't want to set the deadline, his initial excuse was, well, what if it's a few days or a few weeks afterwards? Now he's coming back saying, no, I'll do it by September, then I will set the deadline. It does make people feel uncomfortable.
That's not quite true, though, is it?
Because he's flip-flopped on, 1 minute he was very much pro-Remain.
So have you.
Brexit.
You used to be Remain.
No, I didn't.
Didn't you not?
No.
Why did I imagine that? I think I've imagined that before, haven't I?
You got it wrong.
I've got it wrong
You've
twice.
been caught out.
I do apologise. I thought that you had voted for Remain, but
No.
I take it back. I wouldn't want to insult you.
No, I was a Brexiteer all the way through.
Fine, good man. But let's be fair to Jeremy Hunt, because what he is saying, look, if there is a deal to be done, and the September the 30th deadline that he's imposed, he says, well, look, I think we can do a deal. We need another week to get it through Parliament. I mean, no reasonable person is going to think that that is unreasonable, are they?
Well, so here's, again, before entering politics, I was in business. Jeremy keeps telling us that he's an entrepreneur as well. Now, any businessman or woman would know that for you to do a deal, the machine, government, the people, the country has to know there is a deadline to work to. Right, you never do any deal without a target, whether you're buying a company or negotiating a deal like this. So where Jeremy's got it wrong, and I think he has a problem on this, I suppose he'll reflect on this after this campaign, if it goes against him, is that he doesn't quite believe in this. So he keeps saying, well, the technology will take about 10 years, which I think what he told Laura Kuenssberg on an interview. And then he came back and said, no, we could do it in probably 2 years. Or Greg Hands, one of his spokesmen in his report, said we could do it quicker. So he has a real problem here. I think Boris is actually right on this, in the sense a leader needs to lead.
Let's just grab a word with Theo Osherwood, our political editor, who's obviously been watching as well in Salford. What do you make of it, Theo, very quickly?
The first moment came when Jeremy Hunt asked Boris Johnson whether he would resign if we haven't left on October the 31st. Boris Johnson didn't answer the question, repeatedly didn't answer the question, and then Jeremy Hunt a few moments later quipped that it wasn't that this contest wasn't about delivering Brexit, it was all about putting Boris Johnson into number 10. But I think there was a moment here in the spin room we realised at the very end of the debate, the first part of the debate, when Julie Etchingham turned to both of the candidates, didn't she, and she said, raise your hand if we're going to leave by October the 31st, and Jeremy Hunt raises his hand, Boris Johnson quips, that's the spirit, Jeremy.
It's what's called in the trade a zinger, isn't it?
It was, and then he said, yeah, I mean, it was a moment where, as Nadine was just saying there, that Jeremy Hunt doesn't necessarily portray this confidence that he can deliver Brexit on October the 31st, and then rather sheepishly raises his hand, which fits Boris Johnson's narrative that he's got the optimism, whereas Jeremy Hunt is a bit shy about actually delivering Brexit.
Right, let's go back to the debate, Theo.
Monday at 10:45 on ITV.
Oh, I thought it was coming back because I can hear it in my ears. Never mind. Let's go to a couple of texts and tweets. Boris, very alert tonight. He's on top form, says somebody. Andrew says, both talking over each other is a perfect example of current politics. They're so obviously out for their own ends. You just can't believe a word any of them say. Let's go back to Salford.
Ogunle, Kemi.
You are both politicians who have made mistakes, but I'm interested in why your personality and personal qualities make you the right person to be our Prime Minister.
Kemi, thank you. First of all, to Boris Johnson.
Well, Kemi, thank you very much. I think that the thing I would advertise to you, and if I don't blow my own trumpet, nobody else is going to do it at this stage. I think that what I have, I think, is an inability to get some surprising results in very, very difficult situations. Nobody said I could win the mayoralty in London in 2008. Nobody said we could win the European Union referendum in 2017, and we did. And when I defeated Ken Livingstone in 2012, a considerably wilier and more devious emanation of the London Labour left, by the way, than Jeremy Corbyn, I was able to come from behind and beat him when our great party was 17 points behind in London. So I think I have what it takes to unite our party, unite our country, get Brexit done, beat Corbyn.
Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I've won a few elections too. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be the first Prime Minister in half a century to have won a marginal seat. But I think that leadership is also about your values. And that is about being prepared to do the tough and difficult things, sometimes the things that aren't popular, sometimes things that you have to say to your friends that you'd rather not say, like I said to President Trump today, because I think his comments about Theresa May were unacceptable, and I don't think he should have made them. As I did with the Chinese last week over Hong Kong, and indeed when I was Health Secretary for nearly 6 years, I had some very difficult decisions, some very tough times, but by the end of my time as Health Secretary, we had nearly 3 million more patients in good or outstanding hospitals. So I think leadership is about people who get things done, and those are the qualities that I offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Johnson, straight to the point over President Trump's comments about both the Prime Minister and the UK's ambassador to the US. What's your stance?
Well, look, I have a very good relationship with the White House, and I'm very proud of what I was able to build up during my time as Foreign Secretary. I think it's very important that we should have a close friendship, a close partnership with the United States. They're our most important ally. I think the single most important geostrategic fact of the last 100 years has been the closeness between the US and the UK.
What do you make of what he said?
I don't think, he was dragged into a British political debate in a way he sometimes is. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for him to do, as Jeremy has said, but let's face it.
So is he wrong to make those comments?
Our relationship with the US is of fantastic importance. On Kim Darroch and on British civil servants, I would just say this. I think it is absolutely vital that the advice that civil servants give to ministers should not be leaked by ministers and should not be commented on by ministers if civil servants are going to feel free to give that advice with the impartiality that they want.
Just to get some facts on this particular point, will Sir Kim Darroch still be in his job at the end of his tenure if you become Prime Minister, Mr. Hunt?
Well, look, I will say this about the relationship with...
It's quite a quick yes or no.
I'm going to answer your question, Julie, and I've answered it very clearly already tonight, but I believe that the relationship with the United States and the relationship between the UK and the USA is the most important alliance in history. On that, I agree with President Trump. But who chooses our ambassadors is a matter for the United Kingdom government and the United Kingdom Prime Minister. So I have made it clear that if I am our next Prime Minister, the ambassador in Washington stays, because it's our decision.
Could we have the same confirmation from you, Mr. Johnson?
I listened very carefully to what Jeremy has just said. I repeat my point. It is vital that our civil service is not politicised by ministers leaking what they say.
Will he still be in his job come January?
Whoever leaked that deserves to be eviscerated.
Boris, just answer the question for once. Go on. Tell us if you'll keep the ambassador in Washington. Come on.
I'm not going to.
No one here is going to tell anyone. Just tell us the answer. Go on, Boris. You haven't liked answering.
So would you like to keep him beyond Christmas when he normally retires?
Well, he's due to retire until Christmas, and I will certainly keep him until he's due to retire.
Okay.
I will do that. Now, what about you, though? You've asked me the question.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
I think we want to know your answer, Boris.
Mr. Hunt, let Mr. Johnson answer.
You're the Foreign Secretary. So you're going to keep him into... You wouldn't keep him beyond... You wouldn't extend his term out of sympathy?
I will keep him until he's due to retire. And I think we'd like to know if you would.
Well, I'm not going to be so presumptuous as to...
Thank you.
I'm going to be in a position to take that. But what I will say is that I and I alone will decide who takes important and politically sensitive jobs, such as the UK ambassador to the US.
Thank you.
And we will do it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Whittle. Kemi's question talked about personality, personal qualities. You've both held high offices of state, foreign secretaries both, and health secretary. Mr. Johnson, why didn't you do your homework on Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe?
Well, look, on Nazanin and other very difficult consular cases in Iran, I have the utmost sympathy for her family, and the other cases that are similar. And indeed, I pay tribute to the work of the Foreign Office in continually trying to get them released. But I may say it's very, very important that when you consider those cases, that we all point the blame where it belongs, which is with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who are detaining not just Nazanin, but several others in a way that is inhumane, illegal and unfair. They are responsible, and we should not inadvertently exculpate them in any way.
Mr. Hunt, you talked earlier this evening about your time as Health Secretary. You presided over the first junior doctor strike in 40 years, which saw A&E close at one point. Your plans for a 7-day NHS were criticised as being incoherent and uncosted. Why would we trust you in a negotiation?
Because, Julie, we had a problem, which is that we had excess deaths for people admitted at weekends. And I said, as Health Secretary, I'm going to do something about this. And I would not be a Prime Minister who courted popularity. I'd be a Prime Minister who did the right thing. And after 5.5 years as Health Secretary, some very difficult reforms, we had many, many more people using good or outstanding hospitals. One of the safest hospitals in the country is right here in Salford, and they inspired me for a lot of the reforms that I did. And I made those changes, and it wasn't easy, but we had success, we had progress, and I think we can be proud of the doctors and nurses in the NHS who have risen to the challenge and are doing such a great job.
Could I just ask one more specific question to do with the negotiations that might lie ahead of us? Could people trust somebody who originally voted Remain to see through Brexit?
Yes, because we had that debate 3 years ago, and the country decided to leave. The question now is who is the person who can deliver that decision. Now, Boris campaigned for 350 million a week extra for the NHS. I actually delivered it. I'll deliver Brexit as well.
Thank you very much, both, for that.
But we haven't delivered Brexit yet, and we will get more money back.
Right.
Thank
as
you.
a result of leaving the EU. Which
Thank you very
would not
much.
have been the case if
now,
you
both
had
candidates. Both candidates have made a number of pledges and spending commitments over the past few weeks, and our next questioner, Debbie Hode, wants to ask something related specifically to that. Debbie.
Despite earning a decent salary, I struggle to make ends meet for my family every month. Why are both of you now prioritising tax cuts for the rich or businesses rather than helping those hardest hit by austerity?
Debbie, thank you. First of all, to Mr Hunt.
Debbie, let me answer that question very directly. So the tax cuts that I prioritised are corporation tax cuts. I recognise they are not the most popular tax cuts, but I'm doing that because I want to boost the growth rate of our economy. When President Trump, a totally different issue to the one we've been discussing this evening, when he introduced business tax cuts in the US, he boosted their growth rate. America's now growing at twice the rate we are. And if we grew at 3.5%, we'd have an extra £20 billion to spend on tax cuts for people on low incomes like you, or for our precious public services like the education system, the social care system, and extra police numbers. So as a Conservative, and as someone who set up a business, what I want to do is to grow the size of the cake so that we can do what we all want to do, which is spend that money on the things that people need.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson.
Absolutely right. Good to hear that support there for President Trump, on at least on tax cuts. But I think that, Debbie, what you say is completely right. My agenda would be to focus on those who are hardest pressed. And I would remind you that when I was Mayor of London, we massively expanded the London living wage, putting millions of pounds into the pockets of some of the poorest families in the city. That was then adopted by the government as a national strategy. What I would like to do is to increase the thresholds for national insurance for people on low incomes. But I also believe that too many people, hard-working people, public servants, whether they're senior nurses or heads of maths departments or police inspectors, are being dragged into the higher rates of taxation. And that seems to me to be a legitimate subject for Conservatives to focus on and to want to fix as well.
Okay, Mr. Johnson,
I agree that the way to get more growth out of the economy is judicious tax
I'm trying
cuts
to
that
carve up
stimulate
the time
enterprise.
on these equally. Thank you. Mr Johnson, why was your first pronouncement in this campaign one on tax cuts for the wealthiest?
It's part of a, Julie. It's part of a package that
it was
we
the
want.
First thing that you mentioned.
It was part of a package.
Boris, it was a mistake.
It was
part
of a package.
Tax cuts
Please,
for the rich.
I'm
I'm
talking to Julie.
I have spent my life trying to persuade people that we are not the party of the rich. If your very first tax cuts are for higher rate earners, that is sending the wrong message about our party.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
I'm not actually Prime Minister at the moment. So, you know, my programme is for a wide-ranging package, starting with the people on low, modest incomes, so that we help them with what has been a very, very difficult time.
Boris, is it?
And I also think, and if Jeremy is now going to say, perhaps he is, if he's now going to say that he has no interest whatever in alleviating the burden on the press middle, then let him speak now.
I will.
If he thinks that it is right,
if you'd let me get a word in, Boris.
We are
nurses
Mr.
and
Hunt,
police inspectors
Mr. Johnson, let Mr. Hunt respond.
should be dragged
Thank you,
ever
Mr.
more into
Johnson.
the higher rate of tax. Then let him confirm it. A simple yes or no will suffice, Jeremy. Are you in favour of people on moderate middle incomes paying the higher rate of tax? Yes or no?
I will
yes
answer.
Or no?
I will give you your yes or no
Mr.
question.
Johnson, you've asked the question. Allow him to respond.
Boris, you haven't answered any of my questions.
I've answered all your questions.
Not one.
I've answered all.
I think it's time.
I've answered all your questions.
It's time you answered. I mean,
you haven't told us. Well, let's get back
Mr. Johnson, please.
No, this is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons these blue-on-blue debates are so embarrassing.
And you haven't done any until after people have voted. Is that why?
Let's be clear.
Let's be clear.
Told us when his deadline is. When is his deadline for leaving the EU? He hasn't told us. He hasn't got the faintest idea. He's not going to leave on October 31st.
Stop, please, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Hunt, briefly. Thank you. Thank you.
Does he think people on middle incomes should be paying the higher rate of tax? He won't tell us. I'm only asking.
Thank you.
This is because.
What's his answer? What is his answer?
Thank you.
You know, the exciting thing, because Boris never answers the question, we've got absolutely no idea what a Boris premiership would be about. I will tell you the answer to the question, Boris, and it's very straightforward.
I'll tell you.
My priority for tax cuts would be people on low incomes, because I have... Hang on. Let you speak. I think you have to let other people speak as well. Why is that? Because I have spent my life trying to persuade people that we are not the party of the rich, we are the party of everyone. And if the very first tax cut you announced, which is what you did, is tax cuts for higher rate earners, that is the wrong signal about our values as a party.
Right, I'm going to draw a line under there. Thank you both. Enough. Finished with that. Thank you. We're now going to have something a little different. We had hundreds of questions from ITV viewers, and now we're going to have a quick fire section on a wide variety of issues to try to learn a little bit more about what kind of views our next Prime Minister will have. So we'll just draw a little breath and reset, gentlemen. This from John from Bognor Regis. Should HS2 be abandoned, Mr. Johnson?
I don't think it should be abandoned. I think it's extremely expensive. And I think the business case is dubious. I think we should examine it. We should do a review. And I want to see whether the cash, which is huge, 100 billion, should be better prioritised in the north of the country.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt.
No. We have been talking about bridging the north-south divide for years and years. Now we have a project that is actually going to deal with it. We should back it to the hilt.
OK. Judith from Bury St Edmunds, will you commit to an urgent solution for social care this year, Mr. Hunt?
Yes, I want a 10-year plan for social care, just like I negotiated a 10-year plan for the NHS. I want to merge the health and social care systems, and I want a country where every single older person is treated with dignity and respect.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes, and I think that we need a national consensus about social care, because we've got to take the politics out of this, and we need to bring people together across parties to get it done.
Just very quick one to this. Thank you. Renato from Richmond, will you stop Heathrow Airport expansion from going ahead? Bulldozer at the ready, Mr. Johnson?
Well, the bulldozers are a long time off.
Tell us a secret. Answer the question, Boris. Third runway, yes or no? Go on.
Look, I retain the gravest reservations about the third runways and promoters' ability to satisfy their legal requirements, both on noise pollution and on air quality, and I will be following the legal cases with great interest.
Mr. Hunt.
So if you're going to be Prime Minister, you've got to have an answer to those questions. Could you just
give us your answer on
My
this,
answer
please?
is yes. Third runway will help spread wealth around the country. We should back it.
Thank you. One more question. Pauline from Doncaster, would you scrap universal credit, Mr. Hunt?
No. It's the right system. It's got teething problems. We need to deal with the 5-week wait, which has caused a lot of distress, but the principle is right, and it's got a lot of people back into work, and that's why we've created 1,000 jobs a day for every single day we've been in office, something we can be very, very proud of.
OK.
No.
Universal credit.
No, I would keep universal credit. Speaking as a constituency MP, I do find people who have problems with it, but they are being addressed, and I do think it's the right way forward and helps people into work.
OK. Very briefly, Andrew from Manchester has asked about LGBT rights in Northern Ireland after 2 overwhelming votes votes in the Commons today in support of extending same-sex marriage and abortion rights there. Would you support that, Mr Hunt?
Yes. I think it's a matter for the people of Northern Ireland, and one of the most important reasons for getting the Stormont government in Northern Ireland back up and running.
Thank you both very much, gentlemen, for your answers to those quick-fire questions. I think we covered quite a bit of ground there. And now there is just time for one more short question from Josh Brown.
What one quality do you most admire in your opponent as a future Prime Minister?
So we can just be lovely to one another. You perhaps choose to or choose not to. Mr Johnson.
Well, I've worked very well with Jeremy over many years. I think I greatly admire his ability to change his mind on and campaign for Brexit now, and I think that's a very important attribute.
Well, I really admire Boris's ability to answer the question. He has this great ability. You ask him a question, he puts a smile on your face, and you forget what the question was. It's a brilliant quality for a politician. Maybe not a Prime Minister, though.
You'd briefly like to come back on that, Mr Johnson.
Well, I do think it's important, by the way, just absolutely seriously, I do think it's important to have somebody now who has the energy and has the optimism to get this thing done. And I think the managerialist approach with which we've approached these European Union debates in the last 3 years has really let us down.
Okay, Mr.
What we
Hunt,
need now is somebody
briefly.
who believes in Brexit.
So there was I thinking we were
done.
going to finish by saying nice things about each other. I love the optimism, but unless you have a bit of realism with it as well, things start to go wrong. And I want to deliver what I promise as Prime Minister.
Gentlemen, thank you for that very much indeed. Thank you. A fascinating 50 minutes of debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt. I will now ask the candidates for a very short concluding statement. And first of all, to Jeremy Hunt.
In the last 2 weeks, I've travelled more than 5,000 miles around our incredible country, and I've seen with my own eyes just how lucky we are. But for me, this is not about becoming Prime Minister. It's what you want to change when you get there. I want young people to support our party because state schools are as good as private ones. Families to support us because we help them buy a house, and older people to be sure the social care system is there for them. Boris promised money for the NHS. I delivered it. I will deliver Brexit as well. I only make promises I can keep, and our country deserves no less.
Boris Johnson.
Thank you. Well, thank you. There's only one way to get this country off the hamster wheel of doom, and that is to get Brexit done by October the 31st, to bring us all together with fantastic infrastructure, better education, and by fighting crime, and to end the defeatism that seems to have engulfed us all with a new can-do spirit of modern conservatism. And I have the energy and the credentials for the job. This is an amazing country. Now is the time to show that we believe in Britain.
Jeremy Hunt, Boris Johnson, thank you both very much indeed for that. And that is all we have time for. We'll have much more analysis, of course, on all our social media platforms and on News at 10. Thank you.
Well, that was Britain's next Prime Minister, the ITV debate. Let's cross back to Salford and speak to our political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, that was a lot more entertaining than I was expecting it to be, I have to say. What's your verdict?
It was very good. Julie Etchingham, the presenter, was excellent. The way she moderated the debate was very well researched, well produced, and thoroughly, there were plenty of zingers within that hour-long debate. The best one, I thought, came at the very end when Jeremy Hunt said he admires Boris Johnson's ability not to answer the question and saying that he puts a smile on your face when he answers, but you forget what the actual answer to the question is, which he said was a great quality for a politician, but not for a Prime Minister. In material terms, it is questionable about whether this debate, Ian, will make any difference to the result. Ballot papers went out last week to 165,000 Conservative members, half of whom are believed to have already voted. But Boris Johnson suffered in this debate when he was repeatedly pressed by Jeremy Hunt to answer the question about whether he would resign on October the 31st if we haven't left the European Union. When he was pressed on his tax cuts for those earning more than £50,000, whether Jeremy Hunt repeatedly asked him to say what he would do for those on lower incomes. Boris Johnson insisting that £50,000 was just for those what he described as being on moderate incomes. There were plenty of very, very fiery moments, and I'd finally just say this, that there is a question about if Boris Johnson wins. That is one thing, but he will have suffered damage tonight in the face of hostile questioning from Jeremy Hunt in particular.
Well, he did talk about this blue-on-blue action. I did wonder at one stage whether Jeremy Hunt was talking himself into becoming Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Social Security, given his constant attacks on Boris Johnson. But well, actually, Theo, we'll come back to you a little bit later. I just want to, before we go to the news, we've got Nadhim Zahawi with us, Children's Minister. He's a Boris Johnson backer, and Alistair Burt, former Foreign Office Minister. He supports Jeremy Hunt. Just let me get a minute from each of you with your immediate reactions as to what happened over the last hour. Did it change anything, Alistair Burt?
I hope it would. I mean, it does depend, of course, how many people have put their ballot papers back and all that. But anybody listening who was thinking about how to vote would see Jeremy Hunt winning. He'd see Boris Johnson weak, particularly on President Trump, on low pay, missing the question on resigning, and being prepared to prorogue things that are all, I think, pretty seriously damaging. Jeremy pressed. Boris Johnson didn't really give the clearest answers. I thought Jeremy did really well.
Nadhim, it was almost Boris Johnson's to lose tonight, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot he could gain out of it. There wasn't, I would say, a real zinger moment for either of them. There was a couple of slightly amusing moments, but did Boris Johnson do what he had to do?
I think he did. I think what you saw there is someone who was very clear on the big question that faces the country, which is delivering Brexit, and setting a deadline of 31st of October, I think, is a difficult place for Jeremy to be, because he kept sort of referring to sort of two different positions he had previously, i.e. one, well, if it only goes on for a few more weeks, or the other one about the September scenario that he's painted. And I thought the one zinger there was when there was the audience were asked for a show of hands of who wants to deliver, and Jeremy put his hand up. Boris said, that's the spirit, Jeremy. And I thought his line about peddling optimism is a terrible line. I think you're already seeing on social media saying, I'm with the guy who's peddling optimism. And I think that came through tonight, is Boris is with a clear strategy to deliver Brexit, get a good deal for Britain, defeat Jeremy Corbyn, and of course unite the country.
Well, we'll delve into this in much more detail in just a moment, and we'll also take your calls too. I'm sure you will have your views on what you've heard over the last hour. Which of those two men do you think would make the best Prime Minister? Do you think there is any way that Boris Johnson will be stopped? Because, of course, rumour is that more than 60% of Conservative members have already cast their ballots, and that is the only head-to-head live TV debate that there's going to be. You're listening to LBC. I'm Ian Dale. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Boris Johnson has clashed with Jeremy Hunt over whether he would be prepared to resign if he fails to take the UK out of the EU by Halloween. In speaking on Britain's next Prime Minister, the ITV debate in the past hour, Mr Hunt accused his rival of not being willing to put his neck on the line if he failed to meet the deadline. Whereas Mr Johnson said it was clear his rival wasn't absolutely committed to it, calling him defeatist.
I will prepare our businesses as someone who's run their own business. We can get through this, but what we mustn't do is pretend this is going to be a walk in the park. It is going to be very, very challenging.
I don't think there's no conceivable dissent about that. Everybody agrees that we need to prepare. but we also need to make sure that we are ready by October the 31st to come out. And we must get ready. We were virtually ready on March the 29th. Everybody was braced to do it. They were then stood down. It was a catastrophe. Everybody's preparations were allowed to sag. We cannot do it again.
And there'll be more coming up on this in the next hour. Same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland has moved a step closer after MPs voted to legalise it if a new Stormont executive isn't formed by October. A proposal aiming to extend access to abortion was also approved. LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood has the latest.
Conor McGinn, Labour MP, had an amendment to legalise same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland, and that's passed by 383 to 73. There was a round of applause as that vote went through in the House of Commons. So 2 significant votes tonight on the future of Northern Ireland.
3 senior peers have quit the Labour whip amid continuing controversy over anti-Semitism. Lord Treesman, a former General Secretary and Foreign Office Minister, says the party and its leadership are institutionally anti-Semitic. Labour's rejected what it's calling the false and offensive claims. Counter-terrorism police have been given more time to question a 28-year-old man and a woman who's 25 after their car was stopped in Luton last week. The force said they were both detained under Section 41 of the Terrorism Act, which allows officers to stop anyone they suspect to be a terrorist without a warrant. They were arrested last Wednesday. And doubles duo Andy Murray and Serena Williams are through to the third round of the mixed doubles at Wimbledon. British number one, though, Johanna Konta's out. She was beaten in a singles quarter-final by Barbara Strycova. She found the pressure of a press conference as well all too much.
Please don't patronise me. I would have. No, you are. In the way you're asking your question, you are being quite disrespectful and you are patronising me. I'm a professional competitor who did her best today, and that's all there is to that.
The LBC markets report the FTSE 100 has ended the day down 12 points at 75.36. The pound buys $1.25 and €1.12. LBC weather, heavy rain moving into north of England and Scotland overnight. Clearer, drier and more humid elsewhere though, a low of 12. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Serena Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It is 9:04 here on LBC. Well, if you were listening over the last hour or if you were watching, you will have seen Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt debating head-to-head for the first time in this leadership contest, and it's likely to be the only time before most of the ballots have gone back. I think the Sun have got a debate on about the 15th of July, my birthday, so I'll celebrate it by watching that. But I don't think there's going to be anything else. So people have drawn a lot of conclusions from what they saw or heard over the last hour. I want to hear what your conclusions are. Have you changed your mind over the last hour? Did you see something in one of the candidates that made you think, actually, he's the man for me? 0345 6060 973. With me in the studio, and by the way, you can watch us for the next 15 minutes or so on the LBC website, the Facebook page and the Twitter feed. Nadeem Zahawi is here, Children's Minister, Conservative MP for Stratford-upon-Avon, who's backing Boris Johnson. Alistair Burt, the former Foreign Office Minister and Conservative MP for North East Bedfordshire, who's backing Jeremy Hunt. Let's start off with the question about Donald Trump and Sir Kim Darroch, because Jeremy Hunt was very, very clear in his answer to that. He said that Sir Kim would remain as ambassador until he was due to retire at Christmas. But Nadeem Zahawi, your candidate wasn't as clear.
Well, I think Jeremy initially tried to somehow give the impression that, Kim Darroch's staying there. And I think Boris actually essentially brought out the detail that actually Kim Darroch is retiring at Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think that wasn't the sort of spin that Jeremy wanted to put on the response.
No, but Boris Johnson
he would
wouldn't
stay.
answer the question,
Boris said, first of all, he's not going to be presumptuous to assume that he's Prime Minister. And secondly, that he would decide...
He could avoid answering any question on that basis, couldn't he?
But he would decide, as any good Prime Minister would, rather than being presumptuous now and choosing his cabinet or his senior diplomats, he would decide on whose senior diplomats and the most most important relationships around the world when he does become Prime Minister. That was his response, which I thought was a responsible
question. He fudged
I
the
don't
question.
believe that. I think...
Well, there is no other way of interpreting it, because Jeremy Hunt didn't. He gave his answer, and Boris Johnson did not.
I think Nadim's putting a good spin on it, but it's just not correct. The issue is not about how you appoint ambassadors in general. One ambassador is under attack. He's under deliberate attack from the President of the United States in pretty petty and ridiculous terms, and we're standing by our ambassador. Jeremy Hunt is standing by our
so
ambassador.
Did
Boris, I don't think I heard that, because what he should have said clearly is he's staying, and he did not.
He said very clearly.
He didn't say that.
No, he said very clearly that our diplomats, our civil servants, when they have to report back to London, have to have the ability to speak in a candid and confidential way, and he would absolutely support that.
Boris didn't back the ambassador.
You are being, I think,
let's see what
very
the public
unfair,
think of that.
Alistair.
Let's see what the public
usually
think.
a very fair man
I
in
am.
your dealings.
You bet I'm fair, so I'm minding my
selectively
language
quote.
very carefully. There was another nod to President Trump later on where he gave a comment about his tax thing.
That was your man who said it.
I think the Prime Minister has got to be in a position of being very clear about backing their ambassadors, and I got a clear sense from Jeremy Hunt that's where he was. I didn't get that sense from Boris Johnson, but it's not up to me. You and I have only got one vote each to come. Let's see what the public think.
It was your man who actually nodded towards Trump over his tax cuts for corporations. Boris simply reminded the audience that it was Jeremy actually giving that compliment to President Trump. So it's no good you saying that's another nod from Boris.
Well, let me ask you a question, Nadim, and you can say this is hypothetical, which of course it is. If it was your decision, do you think that the ambassador should stay?
Well, I think whoever is Prime Minister has to make those decisions.
Well, imagine you're Prime Minister.
Kim Darroch is retiring.
You know all
at
the
Christmas.
facts. You know all the facts. You don't. There's nothing that we don't know.
I would back our civil servants, as Boris did just now, fully, because they've got to be able to speak.
So you would keep him in
candidly
place. You
and
would keep him in
confidentially.
place.
That is up to the Prime Minister.
No, but I'm saying you're Prime
decides
Minister now. Imagine that. You're Prime Minister. You've got to make the decision for the good of the country. Does he stay or does he go?
Well, first of all, I'm not Prime Minister.
No, but I'm saying,
not
imagine
going
if
to
you
be-
were.
It's Ian, your listeners deserve better than this, right? I am a junior minister in this government. I'm not going to
But you're a
pretend
leading
at
backer
number
of
10.
Boris Johnson, so
Yes.
I'm just asking you
And
what
Boris
your view
answered,
is.
Well, Boris answered the question. He said he backs his diplomats, his civil service, but he will make that decision.
All right.
To send diplomats, ambassadors to the most important countries in the world. He'll take that decision if and when he becomes Prime Minister. That's the right thing to do. That's the responsible thing to do.
Alistair, but what on earth did Jeremy Hunt mean when he accused Boris Johnson of peddling optimism? That was a bit of a clanger, wasn't it?
I think the point is this: if you want to be optimistic, I mean, that's a good thing.
But actually, before you answer, I've just launched a poll on my Twitter feed. Who won the debate? 52-48 for Boris. 52-48. That figure again. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, not in my house. I mean, I've done
Alistair,
a quick poll
come
with
on.
the family, and we're all head. I think we'll see what other polls come out. I'm very clear that Jeremy did it very well, and there's quite a lot of comment out there. But at the end, it's for our members to make a judgment, and we'll see that. Your question was about peddling optimism. It's a strange combination of words. You peddle something that isn't very great. And I think the distinction that Jeremy was drawing is optimism has got to be really well based. If you're going to be optimistic, there's got to be a solid foundation to it. Peddling something suggests it's a false sort of optimism. And that was his point about Boris.
But you see,
October the 31st, all that sort of thing that Boris Johnson wriggles away from.
The three of us are old enough to remember the 1980 American election where you had Ronald Reagan up against Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter was seen as somebody who wasn't capable of peddling optimism, but Ronald Reagan was very optimistic. And my contention is that optimistic politicians always win elections. Whether you think it's false optimism or not, generally they will always win over the guy that says, well, hang on a minute, have you thought about this? And that's what's happening here, isn't it?
No, I think Jeremy's been very clear on the point. I think Jeremy's been very clear on where he sees a positive role for Britain following our leaving the EU. He's set out his proposals on tax and business. He's set out how he wants to help entrepreneurs. He's set out how he wants to help young people. This is all positive going forward. We've got to clear the Brexit hurdle first. I see no shortage of optimism from Jeremy Hunt, except it's really well based as opposed to Boris Johnson's.
So Alistair is being very polite about his candidate, but if you listen
you would expect him to
yes,
be.
but he's polite to everyone. He's a wonderful man. But if you analyse,
no, come on, we want some more blue on blue action.
I'm going to try and help you there. If you analyse Alistair's choice of words about his own candidate, it's a strange choice of words, peddling optimism.
Yes.
Clearly meaning that his candidate made a mistake.
No, he didn't.
Because it is a strange choice of words, because what is happening now on social media, people are saying, I'm with the guy who's peddling optimism. Right.
I can see the T-shirts already.
And to your point, Ian, optimism wins the day. And actually, Boris's ending there about the hamster wheel of pessimism that we need to get off is quite right. I think people are fed up with politicians telling them how bad things are going to be, and Boris will unite the country, bring the party back together. And you've got people like Robert Buckland and Matthew Hancock, together with Andrea Leadsom, Remainers and Brexiteers coming back together. He will deliver Brexit, he'll defeat Jeremy Corbyn, and then we will deliver all the things that he delivered for London: more housing, better jobs, higher wages.
Okay. Let's just ask a more general question here from Graham in well, it's not a question, it's a statement, but I think you'll have a view on it. Graham in Wiltshire says, we've just had 1 hour of blue on blue. Now it seems we have another hour. #popcorn. Was this debate actually a very good idea, given the fact that, I mean, I had a text from somebody I know fairly high up in the Conservative Party who said this is a disaster, that this is a Conservative Party looking as if it's tearing itself apart. It should never have been allowed to happen.
Well, I think, and you've been chairing the hustings, and there's many more to go still. They're crisscrossing the country.
I have to say, they haven't been as entertaining as that hour was.
Well, and it was entertaining, but I actually think in many ways, as long as we remain civil and we come back together after this leadership contest, renewal is a good thing. You're getting lots and lots of policy ideas, and actually, it's very hard to be in government for 9 years and still to renew and refresh and come up with a sort of domestic policy agenda that really is imaginative and captures the imagination of the nation. I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
As long as Alistair and I can leave this studio and hug and actually, when we have a leader, all get behind that leader, deliver Brexit, unite the country and defeat Jeremy Corbyn, then we're in a good place.
I'm absolutely with my friend here on this.
This is sick, mate.
No. I'll be very brief. You can't have a situation where there are two individuals running for the leadership of their party and obviously to be Prime Minister, and not have a situation where they're not prepared to argue or debate or dispute with each other. It's not blue on blue at this situation. It's two individuals who are putting forward a different case why they should be the Prime Minister. I think it involves the country. It's a lot better than doing it behind closed doors like other parties that don't do this. We didn't have this with Gordon Brown taking over from Tony Blair or anything like this, and we missed it the last time we had a change during a parliament. The debate is very real. It's very tough. There are tough things to be said because there are different characters. One's a professional politician and the other one, I'm not quite sure. But Jeremy Hunt's very clear on what he did.
Which is which?
I think the public can make their own guess on this. But what Nadeem said is absolutely right. You've got to have this, and then it all becomes something different as the government is chosen and the party comes together, and the fight to both to deliver on Brexit and make sure we leave with a deal, and also then to take the fight to those who would do damage to the country. It's the belief of Nadeem and I that that's what the other side represent, and then you'll get some further contest. But I don't think you can avoid it by having the two characters debate as they have, and I don't see it as blue on blue.
We're going to come to our callers in a moment. My assessment of that was that it was much more entertaining than I thought it would be. We actually did learn some things about both of the candidates that maybe we didn't know before. A lot of things maybe were confirmed. I thought that Boris Johnson won it in the first half, and I thought Jeremy Hunt won it in the second half, which is kind of me sitting on the fence, I suppose.
Piers Morgan thinks
unlike you.
Which is
Piers
unlike
Morgan
me.
says Jeremy wins it, so that's it for me.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did.
Well, I suppose we all have to bow to Piers.
Your poll is the source. This is
maybe an early poll.
Well, let's have a look and see what the poll says now, shall we? 2,826 people have voted in the last 15 minutes.
That's impressive. That is impressive.
The gap has widened a little, 55-45 for Boris Johnson.
That's impressive.
But I mean, that actually is. I mean, it's interesting, the texts that are coming into the studio at the moment and the tweets, I would say are split 50-50 roughly. And I think that's not a bad assessment of how that went. I think Jeremy Hunt really tried to pin Boris Johnson down on quite a number of occasions. On one or two occasions, I think he was more successful than others. But you got a bit of the old Boris there as well, and that's the trouble with your campaign. The campaigners sat on Boris because they feel they can't let him out into the media because they're afraid of what he might say.
A terrible indictment that is.
16 hustings.
No.
Crisscrossing the country with the media present.
Look, I should be careful what I say here because I'm chairing a lot of these hustings,
yes,
and they are very good, and the audiences are brilliant in the questions that they ask, and they've asked some damn difficult questions of the candidates. But it's not the same as having them on the stage at the same time, and I totally understand why they've done it that way, because they thought that, well, if Michael Gove was in the final two against Boris Johnson, I mean, that would just be sort of popcorn time right around the country. So I totally get why they did it, but I'm not sure whether you can just say because he's done all these hustings, that has really, I mean, he's got these interviews with Andrew Neil on Friday at the same time that I'm chairing a hustings, which is interesting. So both candidates can be in two places at once. Anyway,
the miracle of modern technology.
It is indeed.
We're here for real.
So, Mark, you're both going to say 10 out of 10, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Come on, Mark. You mark Jeremy Hunt, Nadeem, and you mark Boris Johnson, Alistair.
I thought that Jeremy's heckling didn't do him any favours because he looked like the sort of the lighter candidate heckling the big heavyweight candidate. So I would mark him down for that. I thought, not being able to have a date when we would leave the European Union is problematic for him. He's tried to deal with it, but I don't think it quite works. I thought his answer on the NHS was good because he was very candid about why the junior doctors actually ended up going on strike, and he did well on that. So I'd give him, I'd say 7 out of 10.
Okay. For Boris Johnson, Alistair Burt?
I think Jeremy had to press Boris Johnson for answers, and I think Boris was better when he found a way to answer a question rather than try to escape it. And I think Jeremy Hunt had rightfully to press him in relation to that. I thought when Boris was pressed and was ruffled a bit, I thought there was a bit of something we hadn't seen before that came out. So I give him that. But I thought the rapid fire session was really quite illustrative. Jeremy was clearer on the yeses and nos straightforwardly for some of the difficult questions, and I would mark him up for that, and I would mark Boris down. So in order to walk out of the studio together, I reckon 6.5 to 7 is probably about right for Boris Johnson.
Okay. Let's have a group hug, shall we?
It's a loving.
Or maybe
it's
not.
A loving.
Listen, Nadeem Zahawi, Alistair Burt, thank you very much as ever. We've appreciated your company. We are going to come to your calls in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
The perfect day. Very rarely we're lucky enough to enjoy it. When everything seems to be going just right. Like when you beat the queue for your morning bacon butty. Your lunchtime banter goes viral, and then to top it off, the delivery for your latest project actually arrives on time. It's just like when you're driving the new Ford Ranger. Available with a 1-ton load capacity, 2-litre bi-turbo EcoBlue engine, and selectable driving modes. You'll let nothing stand in your way. Not even the Great British Summer. Discover more. Search New Ford Ranger. Ford Commercial Vehicles. Backbone of Britain.
Renewing your tax credits is too important to forget, so here's an unforgettable reminder.
Don't forget to renew your tax credits. It's very, very, very important.
Renew your tax credits by the 31st of July, or your payments will stop. Go to gov.uk/manage your tax credits today.
Esso customers using their Nectar card could win up to 100,000 points with every fill. So to miss Optimistic in the convertible at pump 4, your luck's in, because the only thing that's going to be raining on you today are Nectar points. And a gentleman in the van at pump 8, you could spend your winning points on a new pressure washer and blast off all those hilarious pictures your mates had drawn on the back of your van.
Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. T's and C's apply at participating Esso sites until 24th of July. Visit esso.co.uk.
Managed to fill those jobs yet?
Oh, I'm struggling.
You know Mark in HR?
He was telling me about Hiring Hub. It connects you to loads of vetted specialist recruitment agencies, so you can widen your candidate search quickly, without any hassle.
Really?
Yeah. You post a job, and recruitment agencies you select send you their best candidates.
Want to fill professional jobs faster? Search Hiring Hub and post your job today.
Mark's nice, isn't he?
Really?
Goodwin Barrett helped William win £21,400 from the Halifax for his mis-sold investment. If the Halifax or any other bank sold you an investment that lost money, start your quick assessment to discover how much you could be owed. Text GOOD to 60777. Text GOOD to 60777 now.
Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service for plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
Radio, playlists and podcasts.
Where it's all together and all for free.
Global Player. Download it from your App Store now. Ian Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
22 minutes past 9. I promise you we are going to come to your calls in just a couple of minutes' time. But first, let's go back to Salford, to Theo Osherwood, our political editor. There's not a big spin team on either side there because MPs are in Parliament at the moment, Theo. But what is the general consensus among your journalistic colleagues?
Well, I have managed to speak to both sides to find out what they've made of it and how they think their man has done, and both are claiming victory. For Boris Johnson's team, they see Jeremy Hunt's equivocation on when the UK will actually leave the European Union, his failure to put a line in the sand, as they say, a papier-mâché deadline was Boris Johnson's word, as the intrinsic weakness in Jeremy Hunt's argument that he, by not setting a deadline, is prepared to push beyond October the 31st to Christmas and into next year. And it was it was the first major clash during the debate, Brexit and when we'll actually leave.
I think I'm far more likely to get us out by the 31st of October because I have a plan which involves engaging with the European Union, negotiating with them. But I just want to test, because Boris has mentioned this date a lot, and I just want to know how solid that commitment is. If you don't get us out of the EU by the 31st of October, will you resign?
We're going to come out on October the 31st. And I think anybody who goes into this negotiation proposing yet again to kick the can down the road will, I think, run the risk of forfeiting trust with the electorate and also undermining our negotiating position in Brussels.
Could you answer Mr Hunt's question?
Delay does not deliver a deal.
Julia,
a deadline will deliver a deal. And we must stick to that deadline.
I think it's a no. And what we've got is someone who says it's do or die for the country.
I'm sorry. I think what we have with
I asked you if you'd resign, Boris.
What I have with my opponent is somebody
will you resign if you don't deliver it, yes or no?
My opponent is clearly not committed to coming out of the EU on October the 31st.
Next clip. And then there was Jeremy Hunt attacking Boris Johnson for peddling optimism.
Being Prime Minister is about telling people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And the difference between you and me is you are peddling optimism, and I'm saying we can make a tremendous...
bit of optimism,
Boris,
frankly.
why don't you... We can make...
I think we've had a belly full of defeatism.
We need leadership that is going to guide us through a big constitutional crisis and make a great success of Brexit. And that means being honest with people.
Jeremy Hunt's team, the point of the argument they're making is that Boris Johnson is telling people what they want to hear. We heard this at the very end of Mr Hunt's arguments, rather than what they need to hear when it comes to Brexit. That he's not being honest with the voters in this election. He's not being honest with the wider public, and that's why he accused Mr Johnson of peddling optimism. There is a feeling, though, that line backfired a little bit, Ian, that Jeremy Hunt has become continuity made, because he doesn't really believe in the project of taking the UK out of the European Union, we're just going to get more of what we've had for the last 3 years. The other point of contention, one of the many other points of contention, was Sir Kim Darroch, the UK's ambassador to Washington, who of course described Donald Trump as inept and insecure in those cables. We had, of course, Donald Trump hitting back, saying that the US was no longer prepared to do business with Sir Kim Darroch. Jeremy Hunt said that if he becomes Prime Minister, he will see out his term as ambassador in Washington. Boris Johnson, on the other hand, failed to answer that straightforward question.
Who chooses our ambassadors is a matter for the United Kingdom government and the United Kingdom Prime Minister. So I have made it clear that if I am our next Prime Minister, the ambassador in Washington stays, because it's our decision.
Could we have the same confirmation from you, Mr Johnson?
I listened very carefully to what Jeremy just said. I repeat my point. It is vital that our civil service is not politicised by ministers leaking what they say.
Will he still be in his job come January?
Whoever leaked that deserves to be eviscerated.
Boris, just answer the question for once. Go on. Tell us if you'll keep the ambassador in Washington. Come on. No one here is going to tell anyone. Just tell us the answer. Okay, go on, Boris. You haven't liked answering.
So would you like to keep him beyond Christmas when he normally retires?
Well, he's due to retire until Christmas, and I will certainly keep him until he's due to retire.
Okay.
That was Jeremy Hunt there. Boris Johnson finishing off. Boris Johnson went on to say that he would be presumptuous to say whether he would allow Sir Kim Darroch to continue up until he is due to retire. Again, prompting Jeremy Hunt to say that he is not answering the question. If you're going to ask who won, Jeremy Hunt, I think, got the better of Boris Johnson in that debate, but ultimately, and I was just speaking to one before I came on air, in one of Boris Johnson's aides, they know that this race is pretty much over. More than 50% of the ballot papers have been posted back to Conservative campaign headquarters, and they are very much of the opinion that most of them are in favour of their man Boris Johnson, and so tonight's debate will make little difference.
I'm not sure how they know that, because actually I think the ballots are sent back to the Electoral Reform Society, and obviously it is a secret ballot, so I don't know how they would know either what the proportion of members that had voted or who they'd voted for.
Well, it was put to me, Ian, that more than 50% have been sent back.
That may be right, but I think that is supposition on their part more than any hard evidence. But we will soon see. Theo, thank you very much indeed. That's Theo Ushwood, our political editor. Right, we are going to go to your calls now. Gavin is in Barnsley. Hello, Gavin.
Yeah, hi, Ian.
Hi.
I mean, my point is very simple. I mean, I'm a Brexiteer. I'm proud of it. I live in, obviously, a Leave area in Barnsley. That's been deserted by the Labour Party. So I watched tonight with a keen interest. I saw a Brexiteer, which is very clear, which is Boris, who's campaigned for it. And I saw Mrs May Mark II. And even worse than that, he came across quite snidey and a bit of a snake, quite frankly, to Mr Hunt.
A snake?
And
How?
Yes, he did. He was the one that was acting not like a Prime Minister. He was trying to get the digs in and be quite personal. And
well, it was a debate. What did you want them to just be totally nice to each other?
Ian, there's a difference with a debate. But he was shouting. He started shouting over first the presenter, and I just didn't like the tone of him. Personally, I am biased because I'm a Leaver and I don't look at him and see a Leaver. I see Mrs May Mark II. So I will put my hand up and say I am biased, but I just didn't like his tone. I just didn't like. I mean, did he run his business? Did he?
Are you a normal Tory voter?
No, not at all. Not at all. I've never voted Tory in my life. So I watched tonight with a real keen interest because we have been deserted by the Labour Party. That's a fact. I mean, it's there now for everyone to see. So I sit here now thinking, right, who we can possibly vote for or even look at? And certainly Hunt, there's no chance. I mean, amount of times he said, he's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur. I don't know how many times he said it. It's getting a joke now, really. That's all I hear from him.
Just think how I feel when I listen to it in the hustings every time. But they both
you said it, Ian.
they both have their stump speeches, and we didn't actually hear a lot of that tonight. To be fair, but they do tend to repeat things because obviously it is different audiences around the country.
Yeah, okay.
I've got a question for you, Gavin. Okay, if there's an election in the next 6 months, you're clearly not going to vote Labour. Are you going to vote Tory under Boris Johnson, or are you going to vote for the Brexit Party under Nigel Farage?
Boris.
See, this is interesting, particularly because of Labour's announcement today where they've moved to a much more Remainy position. And I think in seats like Barnsley and elsewhere in the Midlands and the North, maybe some seats in the South, who knows? But I think predominantly in the Midlands and the North, it's people like Gavin that are going to determine the outcome of the next election. Gavin, thank you very much for your call. Well, for the next half an hour, it is just your calls. No guest, no analysis, apart from your analysis. 9:31 is the time. Serena Farrow has the news headlines.
Boris Johnson insists the UK has to deliver Brexit by October the 31st. Speaking on Britain's next Prime Minister, the ITV debate tonight, Jeremy Hunt argued he would only make promises he can keep. On other topics, they both clashed on Mr Johnson's plan to raise the threshold for higher rate taxpayers. Meantime, Jeremy Hunt's described comments made by Donald Trump about the British ambassador to the US disrespectful and wrong. The US president called Kim Darroch stupid and pompous after a leak of documents where he criticised the White House. And same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland has moved a step closer. MPs have voted to legalise it if the Stormont executive isn't reinstated by October. A proposal aiming to extend abortion access was also approved. LBC weather, heavy rain moving into the north of England and Scotland overnight. Clearer, drier though, and more humid elsewhere with a low of 12 degrees.
The Battle for PM. Follow it live on LBC.
The perfect day. Very rarely we're lucky enough to enjoy it. When everything seems to be going just right. Like when you beat the queue for your morning bacon butty. Your lunchtime banter goes viral, and then to top it off, the delivery for your latest project actually arrives on time. It's just like when you're driving the new Ford Ranger. Available with a 1-ton load capacity, 2-litre bi-turbo EcoBlue engine, and selectable driving modes. You'll let nothing stand in your way. Not even the Great British Summer. Discover more. Search New Ford Ranger. Ford Commercial Vehicles. Backbone of Britain.
At Lidl, we are big on school uniforms. A sweatshirt for £1 to 100% cotton polo shirts for £1.75 and skirts or trousers for £1.75. Big on the whole uniform for £4.50. Available from Thursday the 11th of July. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI.
You can complain free to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman about missold PPI. Alternatively, if you haven't got the time or the inclination, then just get the claims guys to manage the claims process for you. With the August 29th deadline approaching, time's at a premium anyway. So if you can't find your paperwork or you're not even sure you have PPI, it's definitely time to make a decision and start your PPI claim before it's too late. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
And now, before the next programme, a short poem written and read for you today by the celebrated poet Trevor Jones, simply called Life. Who knows what it really means?
Means. Beans. Oh, delicious Heinz beans on piping hot buttered toast. Now that's poetry.
Dreaming of the unique taste of Heinz beans with no added sugar makes it better.
Right, team. Any ideas on where we should advertise the launch of our new hybrid SUV?
How about talking to people while they're actually driving?
Beth, no one watches TV while they're driving.
I was thinking radio.
I knew that.
Research shows that advertising to people at relevant times, like while they're driving, can really boost results.
Great. So we're really motoring now, hey?
Right people, right place, right time. See radio differently at radiocentre.org.
Ian Dale on LBC.
It's 9:34 here on LBC, and we're doing a little bit of an experiment over the next half an hour. You can watch me, just me, in the studio, as I'm presenting this programme, which will be very constraining because if I get a caller that I don't like or disagree with, I can't make any rude signs because the cameras are on. So not that I do anyway, of course. I want to hear basically what you thought of the debate, who won, who impressed you, who didn't impress you. Is there anybody out there who's had their mind changed by that debate? 0345 6060 973. Nikki is a first-time caller from Maidstone. Hello, Nikki.
Hi.
Now, there's a hustings on Thursday in Maidstone, I think.
There's a what, sorry?
A hustings. I think Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt are going to be in Maidstone on Thursday night.
Well, that'll be interesting then.
I won't be with them, though. Now, what did you make of all of that?
To start my story, I'm a mother of 4 children, single mother, recently separated, part own, part rent my property, and I've been working all my life since I was 16. I've now been signed off sick with hip replacement surgery coming up.
I don't envy you that, I have to say.
So I now have to try and juggle finances because I'm on statutory sick pay, which runs out very soon. And the only help I get is universal credit. This was what my question is, because they were very vague on the universal credit.
Yeah, that was in the quickfire section, which I thought was a little bit odd to have a question on universal credit in a quickfire section, because you can't... I mean, if you've only got 30 seconds or a minute to answer, what can you say about a complicated subject like that?
Well, I've been, since they had turned 18, Conservative all the way.
Yep.
And most people call Boris a buffoon and stuff, but I tend to like him. But I was swaying for Jeremy Hunt until tonight when he said it works. It's shady, but it works. Well,
he didn't quite
really
say that, to my recollection.
How am I meant to feed my children? Because now I've got to pay on my statutory sick pay a mortgage plus rent and feed my children. I've literally had to go to food banks right now.
And you're not getting any help from your previous partner?
Absolutely none. Nothing whatsoever. Everyone just tells me nothing to do with universal credit. That's 4 to 6 weeks without any income in my household. I haven't done it yet. Luckily, my ex-partner is helping me out in the mortgage department, but the rent department, I am now, as it stands, 2 months behind, and my housing department is telling me to go universal credit. That's going to be another 4 to 6 weeks without any income, without no income coming into my household whatsoever.
So neither of them said that they would scrap universal credit. I think both of them acknowledged that there were problems with it, though. But you felt that Jeremy Hunt didn't. You thought Boris Johnson answered that question better.
From what I gathered, obviously I was doing packed lunches, and I had the kids around as I was trying to listen to the broadcast on LBC, and from what I gathered, Jeremy Hunt turned around and said, "There's not a problem."
No, to be fair to Jeremy Hunt, he didn't say that.
Okay, it could just be me.
No, let me tell you, because I think you did mishear him. My recollection is that he said that he wouldn't scrap it, but he recognised that there were areas where it wasn't working, and they were trying to address that. So,
Ian, I've worked every day since I was 16, and I just don't feel like I'm getting any help at the moment.
But somebody's just texted in saying that you can get an advance payment.
You can, but then you have to pay that back out of the allowance you get. Out of when they backdate it, that goes straight out. So you're in a worse situation. I'm not understanding it. I've been to Citizens Vice, and they've said, yeah, that's the case. Whatever you get in advance, you have to pay back. I feel like I'm doing 2 steps forward and then 4 steps back.
Well, if I were you, and I would be writing to my MP, Helen Grant, that's your MP, not my MP, write to her and see if she can advise you in any way to try and speed it all up. But you are right, you would have to pay that back over a period of time. And of course, you are in a situation now, Nikki, where you've worked all your life, you've landed up in a situation that you hadn't bargained for, and that's where the welfare state needs to step in. And if it's not stepping in properly, I can understand why you feel rather aggrieved. Thank you very much. Let's go to Mohammed, who's in South Shields. Hello, Mohammed.
Hi there, you all right?
Hello.
I think Boris looked very uncomfortable tonight, and I think the better man was obviously Jeremy. Would you have Boris as a Prime Minister? I don't think so. Would I have Jeremy Hunt as a Prime Minister? Possibly. I think I'm split two ways. I think if Boris can deliver Brexit and then leave after he's delivered Brexit, fine. I think it's just in such a mess at the moment, you know.
But do you have any confidence that either of them can do that?
Not really, to be honest. I think it's all talk.
So what happens? Let's imagine that Boris Johnson does become Prime Minister, and he doesn't manage to get us out on the 31st. Now, Jeremy Hunt.
Have to resign, won't
well, Jeremy Hunt asked him that, and he didn't answer, did he?
Well, we'll have to. I mean, if he gets in as Prime Minister, that's what he said he's going to do by the end of the 31st. You know, he will deliver it. If he doesn't, he's failed, and if he's failed, he'll have to go.
Are you a Conservative voter?
No.
Could either of them persuade you to vote Conservative?
No.
But you clearly feel strongly enough to phone in to talk about them.
Yeah, because it's our future. It's what's important, you know. How do I feel the strongest tonight watching that? I think Jeremy Hunt. And I think out of leadership, I think Jeremy could make a good Prime Minister. I think Boris always laughs through everything. We don't need a joker in number 10. We need someone who can deliver the job.
What puts you off voting Conservative?
I just think they're the party of the rich, aren't they? You know, they don't live in the real world. You know, they don't see what happens in the north. You know.
But there are a lot of Conservative voters, Conservative members who really would not agree with that characterisation of their party. I know that's in a way the reputation, and that came up in the debate tonight. Jeremy Hunt was saying, well, to Boris Johnson, you want to give tax cuts to the rich, I want to give tax cuts to the lower paid. So there was a bit of a contrast there, wasn't there?
Oh, very much so, but you've got to look at it. Who would be the best leader of the Tory party? And in my eyes, looking at it tonight, it would have to be Jeremy Hunt. I just don't believe Boris. Do you know what I mean? I really, really don't believe Boris, and I don't think he can deliver it. I think he put himself forward to be Prime Minister to see how far he'll go with it. If he does become Prime Minister, then...
All right, Mohammed, I'm going to leave it there because I've got a switchboard full of calls, and let's pack as many as we can in before 10. Marie is in Earlsfield. Hello, Marie.
Hi, I bet you have. So we had to listen to an hour of that, both of them, rubbish, and then 29, 30 minutes of other people talking rubbish. And the reality of it is, if they're not walking our walk, and do you know what? I am sick to death of listening to these people. I can't believe that the bigger you are, the harder they're going to fall, because we are doomed, because they all talk a lot of rubbish. What do they think? The nurses, the doctors, the people that work in restaurants are striving to try and put food on the table. No one's asking for going on holiday to abroad, and I'm so mad, and it's got nothing. That's why Brexit happened, because people, the majority, the working people, and I'm not talking about Clark, I'm talking about the people that run this country, have been let down. And I listened to that tush. I listened to it, and
Can we say,
out of
Tush?
their mouths, and they honestly think that we're believing them now. It's
Well, do you believe
horrifying.
anybody? I mean, forget these two. Do you believe any other politicians?
I'd love to. Do you know what? If I had a wish for our beautiful country, which I love and I would die for, I would fight for, I have got no faith in them. They don't walk in our shoes. And honestly, I listen to LBC all day. It drives me bloody mad. I listen to certain commentators who, we all got likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you now,
Go on.
it's called a conversation.
Marie, go on. Tell me, who do you dislike?
No, I'm not going to get personal.
Oh.
What I'm going to tell you now is it's called a
entertainment,
conversation. And the people that listen to LBC, we are the ones that listen and the ones that are living. And the woman that you said, the woman that's having to go to a food bank and work, that's the majority of the people. And the people that are talking...
No, I'm sorry, Marie. I'm sorry, Marie. You don't overstate your case. It's not the majority of the people. There are a lot of people who are experiencing very difficult times, but it's not the majority.
No. Do you know what? That's where you are wrong, my darling. That's where you aren't getting it. Because, and I'm not being horrible to you, because I'm actually all right. I don't know if I'm going to be all right when I'm really, really old. But what I'm telling you now is that it is scary out there, and I am worried because not just for my children, but if they don't stop, I call it speed and greed. All people want is just to be able to put food on the table, pay their rent or their mortgage. Not talking about holidays, not talking about going out for dinner 2 or 3 nights a week. We're talking about hard-working people, and they're not listening. They have to start listening, or they're...
Okay. Well, Noah has tweeted about what you're saying, Marie. He says Marie she speaks for the nation. A number of politicians say a lot without saying anything at all, I'm afraid. Marie, thank you very much indeed. Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Tom Swarbrick.
A robust head-to-head Tory leadership debate, Hunt pressing Johnson to be real, Johnson demanding some optimism. Who do you think won?
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
The perfect day. Very rarely we're lucky enough to enjoy it. When everything seems to be going just right. Like when you beat the queue for your morning bacon butty. Your lunchtime banter goes viral, and then to top it off, the delivery for your latest project actually arrives on time. It's just like when you're driving the new Ford Ranger. Available with a 1-ton load capacity, 2-litre bi-turbo EcoBlue engine, and selectable driving modes. You'll let nothing stand in your way. Not even the Great British Summer. Discover more. Search New Ford Ranger. Ford Commercial Vehicles. Backbone of Britain.
At Lidl, we are big on school uniforms. A sweatshirt for £1 to 100% cotton polo shirts for £1.75 and skirts or trousers for £1.75. Big on the whole uniform for £4.50. Available from Thursday the 11th of July. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI.
So, Mark told me about Hiring Hub. The best kept secret in recruitment, he said.
Yeah?
They help you find quality candidates and fill professional jobs fast. Gets great reviews too.
So, you going to go for it?
Is he single?
Not with Mark, with Hiring Hub.
I posted an IT job a few days ago. Interviewing 4 people tomorrow.
Want to fill professional jobs faster? Search Hiring Hub and post your job today.
Is he though? Single?
Rosa.
Have you ever bought an investment sold by Barclays, Halifax, Lloyds, Santander or any other bank or financial advisor? Investments like stocks and shares ISAs, investment bonds and certain types of pension can be risky. If you lost money with one of these investments, you could be owed thousands of pounds in compensation. Even if you no longer have the investment or the paperwork, here at Goodwin Barrett we can still help. To start your free assessment with Goodwin Barrett, text SOLD to 66777. That's SOLD to 66777.
Renewing your tax credits is too important to forget, so here's an unforgettable reminder.
This
to renew your tax credits. It's very, very, very important.
Renew your tax credits by the 31st of July, or your payments will stop. Go to gov.uk/manage your tax credits today.
You know their names. Now, find out who they are. Listen to Full Disclosure with James O'Brien, an insightful podcast featuring rare, candid conversations with the biggest names in politics, entertainment, and sport. And while James gives you a look into their lives, keep an eye on yours with Blink, wireless home security cameras you can monitor on your smartphone. Full Disclosure with James O'Brien. New episodes every Monday, thanks to Blink home security cameras.
Leading Britain's conversation. Ian Dale. Tweet at LBC.
And believe it or not, there is a new episode of the For the Many podcast ready for download on your phone right now. That's a podcast I do every week with Jackie Smith. I did a Twitter poll, announced it at 9 o'clock. 6,500 people have voted on it so far. Boris Johnson has 58% of the vote and Jeremy Hunt 42%. So I can't say that my Twitter followers are necessarily representative of the entire nation, but 58-42 is what they think as to who won the debate. Let's go back to your calls. Tony is in somewhere I've never heard of. Is it Doveridge or Doveridge?
It's Doveridge, thank you for taking my call.
Where's that?
It's in the Derbyshire Dales. It's the southernmost village in the Derbyshire Dales.
I was very near you at the weekend. Tony, what would you like to tell me?
I was troubled by listening to the debate, obviously, and I am a paid-up Tory member. I'm looking at my ballot paper now, which I haven't filled in yet. I was troubled by Jeremy Hunt's question about would you resign if we don't hit the deadline. And the very fact that he's thinking that makes me worry about him.
Why?
Because he's obviously got a plan. If he were to be successful, then he has a plan for himself, which is worrying in itself for me.
Well, I'm not quite sure why you should be worried by that, because it was a reasonable question to ask. If Boris Johnson has set this hard deadline of October the 31st, if he doesn't meet it, what happens then? That was a perfectly reasonable question, I would have thought.
Yeah, but why even bring up the possibility of not meeting it? I thought the whole point of it was that was the deadline.
Well,
the deadline is that is a drop deadline.
Yeah.
It's not just a deadline, not an aiming
Well,
point.
that might be the case if Boris Johnson had a big majority in Parliament, but of course he wouldn't have as Prime Minister, and so therefore Parliament might be able to prevent us leaving on October the 31st. So in that case, you could say, well, he should resign or call an election, I suppose.
Well, he was quite clever about either proroguing Parliament or calling an election. He managed to avoid that one, which is what he does. He's very good at it. Hunt was definitely the more polished, but then that's what he does. He's a very slick operator.
So what's going to decide how you vote in the end?
I'm still undecided. I'm leaning now more towards Boris Johnson because I think he's a more able chap. And also, again, I'm just in the process of rereading most of his books, and certainly I'm just rereading his biography of Churchill, and I think he kind of sees his destiny there.
Is it worth reading, that book? Because I've got it, but I haven't read it yet.
It's worth reading, yeah. He's a good author. He's a good journalist.
I've got Andrew Roberts' Churchill book, which is like 1,000 pages.
As well, and he knows his history.
Yeah.
And he knows the proper quote as well, blood, toil, tears and sweat.
All right, Tony, we wish you luck in your decision-making. Isidore says, Ian, you just got owned by the caller who stated it was a fact that the majority of people have to use food banks. But it's simply untrue. The majority of people do not have to use food banks. So how that constitutes me getting owned, I'm not quite sure. Andy is in Broxbourne. Hello, Andy.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, I can declare I don't use a food bank to start off with.
Okay.
That was uncalled for. I just wanted to say that I listened to the debate. There was a lot of talk earlier on about people already voting. I hadn't, and I decided to wait until the hustings. I listened to the debate tonight, and I thought that Mr. Hunt went very negative almost straight away. So at 9:05, as I drove past the post box, I filled in my vote and posted it.
And that's really what persuaded you?
I've got to be honest, I was already leaning in that direction. But I just didn't think he came across as very pleasant. I thought the will you resign question was like a landmine. You know, it was a very clever political trap. I thought Boris, listen, he's very good at not answering stuff, but he answered it quite convincingly in the end. That you don't want to give the EU any excuses, and obviously it would be a good reason to block things if they didn't like him. I just thought overall he came out much better. I do find him quite affable. And I just thought that Jeremy Hunt was on the attack. I guess he had nothing to lose. So he was on the attack from the beginning.
He did have something to lose, though, didn't he? Because he's got his cabinet position to lose. I have to say, well, exactly. See, I was wondering earlier today whether Boris Johnson might actually think, OK, Jeremy Hunt's actually performed quite well in this. He's been a reasonable guy. I'll keep him as Home Secretary. After that, I'm not so sure that will be going through Boris Johnson's mind tonight.
I agree totally. I mean, yes, it might be that he's not quite the man that we think he is, and he might just think, well, that was a great performance, and it didn't hurt. But I thought it was a very interesting debate, but I thought Boris was very straightforward. Of course, he doesn't answer things very straightforwardly first time asked, but I just right at the beginning of the thing, I quite liked Rory Stewart, and then he went negative. I wasn't a fan of Gove, but he went negative pretty quickly, and I watched Andrew Leadsom on Peston a few weeks ago, and he kept saying to her, what do you think about Boris? What do you think about this? And she just kept saying, I'm not here to tell you why somebody else shouldn't be the leader. I'm here to tell you why I should be. That, I thought, was fabulous. I actually wanted her to get through to the last two.
I have to say that of all of the 9 contenders that came into the studio for an hour, and I can say this now because it's nearly all over, I thought she was one of the most impressive, actually. She did answer questions, and I think she's actually just a very nice person. Andy, thank you. Let's go to Mark, who's in Lincoln. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Ian, are you okay?
I'm fine, thank you. What would you like to tell me?
I think Boris came across terribly, if I'm honest. There's no substance. It's all sort of sound bites and look how jolly I am. And I think Jeremy Hunt exposed him a little bit with trying to get him to answer questions. I think he came across evasive. I mean, I've not been a big fan of Jeremy Hunt, but he's sort of gone up in my estimations. And I do worry that Boris seems to be quite happy to just crash out on the 31st. And I think he's reckless enough to do it. And I think it probably needs a safe pair of hands, a sort of steadier ship.
What about Boris Johnson's accusation that Jeremy Hunt is effectively Theresa May Mark II?
Yeah, I sort of agree with that, but I sort of had a higher opinion of Theresa May and a lot of other people did. I think she was trying to do an impossible job and was sort of a scapegoat in many ways. I think whoever had that had a poisoned chalice, and I don't think there's a person that could have got any deal over the line. So I think he's probably a little bit more business savvy than Theresa, perhaps, a bit more common sense. I think he's a slightly better version, but I just don't see anything in Boris other than a sort of English version of Trump, sort of populism and saying everything's going to be fantastic, but with no substance behind it.
OK, Mark, listen, we've only got a minute and a half left. Let's devote that to Daniel in Childs Hill. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, Ian. I have to say, I completely disagree with your last caller there, Mark. I thought on the substance and the policies, Boris Johnson, for me, won absolutely hands down. I've been waiting 9 years since having voted for the Conservatives when they came in 2010 and feeling so betrayed because I felt like they've lurched to the left. Boris Johnson came out and he announced the tax cuts, raising the income tax threshold to allow more people to keep the money they actually earn. He announced the cut in their national insurance, which will help people on low pay. And he came out against HS2. And whereas Jeremy Hunt came out, Jeremy Hunt, for me, lost it completely. He was terrible. He was robotic. He came out saying he backs HS2 to the hilt, grotesque political vanity project.
Well, at least he gave a straight answer to a straight question.
Well, so did Boris. Boris said...
I'm not saying he didn't.
Yeah. Well, look, Jeremy Hunt is so robotic. He is Maybot in trousers. He's got no personality. He's got no charisma. And Boris Johnson just won it. Yeah.
All right, Daniel, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Let me just tell you, tomorrow on Cross Question at 8, we have Lauren Booth, Liz Kershaw, Simon Heffer and Alex McGovern. Now, you may not know who Alex McGovern is. He phoned into Cross Question last week. He was so impressive. He's a member of the Youth Parliament. We thought we'd invite him on the panel. So he's going to be with us next week. I don't know why Tom Swarbrick is laughing.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Good luck to him.
I will be back tomorrow.
See,
at
anyone
7.
can get on it.
Yeah, might invite you one day. You never know.
No, thanks.
I will be back tomorrow at 7. Coming up at 1, it's Darren Adam, but next it's the very interruptive Tom Swarbrick.
Fighting like Tory leadership contenders. Ian, thank you. Welcome to the show. Tonight at 10.
He's not going to
Thank you. Stop, please, Mr Johnson. Mr Hunt, briefly. Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Ministerial contenders tearing lumps off one another.
If you don't get us out of the EU by the 31st of October, will you resign?
We're going to come out on October the 31st.
On Brexit, on tax and spend.